I told the story in the last episode of an Ashaninka Native American from the high Amazon who had convinced me that I must visit Lost World, a place far from anything modern in the cloud forest, also of the high jungle of the Amazon. His descriptions were few, but with a constant grin, and what he did describe seemed otherworldly. An English biologist and I would do a several-day hiking trip to see it. The first night we camped among Inca ruins and were treated to hallucinations of demons. I wondered if maybe this was from local plants emitting something into the air. The next day began in the high Andes and would go up to passes at about 15,000 feet or 4,600 meters. It was a day of trekking with views of permanently snow-capped ranges of 6,000 meters or 20,000 feet. These were both to the south and north of us. Toward the end of the day, we began moving decisively east. The weather in South America moves from the Atlantic Ocean westward. The upper half of the continent's eastern part is mostly jungle and wetlands. The weather is unable to move over the height of the Andes Mountains. The moisture, then, is dumped to the east of the Andes, and the lands to the west are some of the world's driest deserts. By going east, we were moving away from the dry climate into the jungle. Most of this day, we were in areas that didn't have any plants, as we were too high above tree line, where it is too cold for trees to grow. The exception was the Queen of the Andes, a spike-like plant reaching up to 80 feet tall. It only flowers once in its life, which may be 50 years or more. Toward the end of the day, we reached the high portion of the cloud forest. We knew when we entered the cloud forest, we must be around 3,500 meters, or about 11,000 feet. It had been a long day of hiking, as we covered around 50 miles or 80 kilometers. We hiked between 18 and maybe more than 20 hours that day. If there had been hallucinations, as there had been the day before, that night, I think we would have been too tired to experience them. We used the same trails the Incas did. I suspect the Inca civilization had briefly extended into the cloud forest and maybe to Lost World, but culturally it was something different. I also suspect that the trails we were using in the cloud forest were developed in ancient times, a very long time before the Inca. The next morning we again woke early and began hiking almost immediately after a quick breakfast. We were still more than a day away from Lost World. The plan was to, after reaching Lost World, to turn around, which would be difficult for me. I knew the trail continued down to the low jungle, and it probably wasn't that far. When I was a small boy, we had lived next to lowland jungle in the country of Panama. Lowland jungles have held my fascination ever since. In the years between living in Panama and this trip, I had not been to a lowland jungle, and this was my chance. The Englishman had no interest in continuing on. I would do this alone if I did. The problem was, I was already being risky by visiting a little explored area in Lost World. Doing the same in a little explored part of the low Amazon would be much more dangerous, and it would be a given. I would incur problems. One other problem would be that I might encounter unfriendly Stone Age tribes. Many tribes in this region have not been contacted by outsiders. This is a land of blowguns and deadly arrows, both with poisonous tips. I would have no idea how to greet these people. They spoke unknown languages and did not know of modern man. I was also reminded of Percy Fawcett, who was searching for the lost city of Z and disappeared, never to be found again in these tropical forests. He is the character who Indiana Jones is based on. I was intrigued by encountering people who no one in the modern world had seen, and also seeing a place no one in the modern world had seen. It was tempting, but I decided I wouldn't continue beyond Lost World. I wondered if any Westerners had visited even Lost World. So many places have not been explored in this region. We spent the night in the high cloud forest. The following morning, our hike took us down to about 1,500 meters, or less than 5,000 feet. This was more jungle than the other areas of our hike and was more dense. Life was abundant. We saw both a giant armadillo, which was about as large as a medium-sized dog, and a giant anteater, which was about the size of a large dog. We saw monkeys, toucans, macaws, other parrots, and the strange-looking cock-of-the-rock bird. This had a bright red coloring and looked like it had a head that was normal size and then grew upward to reach twice its original size. There was a long wattled umbrella bird, which looked like an Elvis Presley impersonator, impersonating Elvis when he had his hair long and extending upward, called a pompadour or ducktail. But these birds' pompadour would extend out in front of their faces. The trees were gnarled, with quite a bit of character to them. I can't say why, but gnarled trees are common for this tropical cloud forest. We saw numerous sandbox trees, which might be the most unusual tree I have ever seen. It looks like it has armor all around, with spikes sticking out. If that's not enough to deter you, its fruit is quite poisonous. The fruit looks like a small pumpkin, and when it dries out, it explodes to send seeds out all over. The explosion is accompanied by a loud bang, and the seeds reach speeds that can kill nearby people or animals. We also saw jaguar tracks. I wasn't concerned as big cats, except for lions, usually don't bother people. The lower jungle looked like something from the Mesozoic era, the time of the dinosaurs, with giant ferns, plants, and trees with enormous leaves. Moss was everywhere. Epiphytes were common. These are plants that grow on other plants, mostly trees, and get their water from the air. There were also orchids and climbing ferns. We started climbing again, and things started changing. A pleasant eeriness prevailed. The animals, plants, and trees were strange. There were unfamiliar sounds and smells. We saw a monkey with huge round eyes and no ears. I'm not even sure if it was a monkey. It moved like a monkey, but didn't have a monkey's temperament. It was calmer. There were yellow-tailed woolly monkeys, with by far the thickest fur I have seen on any monkey. It was as if they were wearing a mink coat. Some of the frogs had a toy-like look to them. These were the ones that Amazon tribes would derive their poison to use at the end of arrows and darts. Other frogs had bright colors. There were some animals that I don't know to this day. Also, some of the strangest looking insects I have seen. The forest canopy was thick, but not its undergrowth or floor. The Ashanika man told us we would know we were approaching Lost World as our personalities would change, that Lost World would be a completely meditative experience. This is certainly what happened. Both of our personalities were not the type to slow down and smell the roses. We were extremely driven and tried to see all we could all the time. We pushed through our travels, not so much enjoying them as we lived them, but knowing the memories would be there to enjoy for a lifetime. For us, traveling was about rising very early in the morning and seeing all we could until late in the night. It was about knowing, understanding, and experiencing each place as much as we could. There would be little sleep and a mindset of go, go, go. As I reflect now, I am glad I did this, as it enabled me to see much more of the world than if I had traveled casually. I then have been able to relive each day of my travels over and over again. Lost World reminded me of a forest of bonsai trees with well-maintained moss on the ground. This looked like it had been designed or was man-made, similar to an ambiance video that graphic designers create and add meditative music to for YouTube. Stunning landscapes that couldn't possibly exist. It was a strange, surreal experience with many plants and trees I had not seen before. It seemed much was possible there. I wouldn't have been surprised in Lost World to see leprechauns, fairies, unicorns, mermaids, or other mythical beings. We started spotting psychedelic colored butterflies, although we saw the first of these before Lost World. There were more in Lost World. It was the only animal we saw there. No birds, no monkeys, no frogs, no reptiles, no animal tracks, and no other insects. It was as if only the butterflies were invited, but none of the others. It was the world that time forgot. Lost World seemed to take a different evolutionary approach. Instead of the world of predatory and destructive behavior, this seemed to be completely absent of that. Was Mother Nature experimenting? It was a Shangri-La of the jungle world. The colors seemed brighter and more vibrant. The gentle stream, which I knew eventually reached the Amazon, seemed magical, and the way its water percolated as it moved at a pedestrian pace, taking its time, dancing, seemingly moving slower than water moves elsewhere. Like us, it slowed down, being caught in the experience and elation of a Lost World. All seemed kind and emphatic there. It was in the air. The trees, the plants, even the soil, all conspired to maintain a place of perfect peace. The experience of the Lost World was a dreamlike state. We walked with little motivation. I didn't question anything when I was there. My mind is usually very inquisitive, but not there. I had no curiosity whatsoever. I didn't pay attention to the details of the place, which is unusual. As a storyteller of this place, I am lost for words to accurately describe what it was. The Ashaninka tribesmen who told us about the Lost World also had few words to describe it. I think his smile was from love of the experience, but also in knowing that we would experience something very different than we had before. Was it possible our senses were just burned out? What had happened the first day with the hallucinations, then hiking through several ecosystems that would quickly change? We experienced everything from frigid, dry, high mountain freezing temperatures to the humid, high jungle. We had slept little, hiked a great distance while going up and down in elevation many times. I am wondering if there was something natural in the air causing a lack of awareness. Was there a plant that protectively was emitting a chemical to throw off our senses? Something known as a lectin, but a lectin in the olfactory sense. It was a very odd experience for me. This day was euphoric. It was an experience like no other. Certainly one of my life's most unusual. The biologist reported the same thing. We talked often on our trip, but not in Lost World. Not a word. For each of us, it was as if the other were not there. We then existed in a very, very strange place and adopted its mindset, its peaceful state. In the descriptions, I have included the playlist, which I have my other travel videos. Please join me as I continue to cover my travels around the world, and often to places few have been. Please subscribe, like, and join me in future videos. Have a great day.